Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Is your mower acting like this? Hard to start, has to crank forever, maybe it won't even start at all. Maybe it spits and sputters, coughs, sneezes, or this one also started dying now while I'm in the middle of mowing. It'll just shut off. Well, if you're experiencing stuff like that, there's a pretty good chance that maybe your mower's got a faulty fuel pump. This is my John Deere LT160. It's got the 16 horsepower Kohler Command engine, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the fuel pump on your riding mower. But don't click away if you've got a different brand mower, because this process is going to be identical for basically any mower with this single cylinder Kohler Command engine. This is a pretty straightforward process. You can get it done yourself using just some basic hand tools and save yourself some time, some headaches, and most of all, some money. So let's get started. If this video helps you out, do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up button. Also, if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel for more DIY mower repairs and tons of other workshop builds. Now let's get this mower back up and running. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all of you are doing awesome. Yeah, we got to do a mower repair this time. You've seen this thing in several other videos fixing different things. Today, we're going to add one more to the checklist. Today, we're working on the fuel pump. As I mentioned at the beginning, this thing has been getting hard to start for quite some time. You heard it backfire when I was trying to start it up. That is also a sign that this thing is not getting enough fuel. And most recently, right in the middle of mowing, this thing will just die. It's almost like you just ran out of gas. It will eventually start back up after cranking and cranking and cranking, but really, I think now the fuel pump is just on its last leg. One thing that I've been noticing over the last year or so is that the fuel pump has been getting increasingly greasy, damp with fuel, and then it collects dust and dirt. I noticed it about a year ago, but it was only one small area. That was about the beginning of the season last year, and by the end of the season last year, this thing was almost completely soaked, and this year, it's just covered in filthy with grease and grime, as I'm guessing the fuel has been leaking, and then of course it collects dust, and that makes it a mess. That's also another indicator that this thing's done for. So I guess that's enough talking about this fuel pump. Let's jump in, get this thing replaced, and get this mower back up and running, because I got some mowing to do. The tools you're going to need to do this job are not very many. This is all we're going to use to replace this fuel pump. I got a pair of vice grips that I've wrapped the end with some electrical tape. We're going to use this to gently pinch off the fuel line so that we don't leak fuel. There's also specialized clamps you can use, but I'm trying to use what I have. We're going to need a screwdriver to undo the hose clamps. I know this one has had the hose clamps replaced in the past. Yours may have the little spring type, so you may need a regular pair of pliers to just squeeze those hose clamps, but mine has regular screwdriver type hose clamps. Then we're going to need a socket. This is a 10 millimeter with an extension on a ratchet to remove the bolts. You could also get by with a 10 millimeter deep well, I think would work okay. And then finally, to clean up everything, we're going to use some sort of scraper. This one is specifically a gasket scraper, but you could use a razor blade, anything like that to clean up the gasket surface before we put the new pump on. And then of course, we'll just use these in reverse to install the new one. Not really all that many tools required. So right here is our fuel line coming in. If we just pull this hose clamp off right now, there's a really good chance that gas is just going to pour out of there. So we're going to take our vice grips or whatever clamp you're going to use, and we're going to gently squeeze this just to pinch it off. I'm not cranking it down super tight, and again, the electrical tape is to protect the hose. I don't want to damage it. I only want to squeeze it enough to keep gas from leaking out. Now we can come in here and loosen this hose clamp. And you can see we're not leaking gas because we've got this pinched off. We'll now disconnect this little upper hose. And as I mentioned already, I have replaced these clamps several years ago because one of these lines started leaking, so I had to replace this little piece here, and I just replaced all the hose clamps. I'm not a fan of those squeezy type ones, but there's a pretty good chance that if you've never messed with your particular engine, it's probably got the little squeeze clamp on there instead of this style. You just take a pair of pliers, squeeze that together, and then you can slide the clamp up out of the way. And this line is really stuck on there. So we may have to cut that off and put a new piece on there, because that does not want to come off of there. That's no big deal. Since I can't get that off of there, I am going to cut this line and we'll splice in a new piece. It's not going to hurt a thing. So we've got our line disconnected. Now we can grab our 10 millimeter. Hopefully you haven't lost your own 10 millimeter. Loosen up these two bolts. We've got two mounting bolts right here and here. And now I'm betting that this is going to be stuck on there pretty good. Oh, look at that. Not too bad. Now we're going to carefully pull this off of there. And there you can see that's the arm that is run by a lobe on the cam inside the engine. And that's why this is called a mechanical fuel pump. I'm going to stuff a rag in here temporarily. That way we can take just a moment and compare this old grimy pump to the new one. One thing you want to have on hand before starting this process is, of course, the new pump. There's a lot of options. You can order a knockoff online, but I think the quality of those can be kind of iffy, and I personally don't ever try to go that route unless it's an absolute emergency. I always try to go with the factory replacement. You can see right here, we've got the Kohler name right on here, and right on the top, we've got a John Deere part number. This one in particular is part number AM133627. John Deere right there. So I know that this is going to be the correct pump for my model machine. And how exactly do you know that you're getting the right part for your specific machine? Well, for myself, since my machine is a John Deere, and I like to use the John Deere parts, I use a website called greenpartsstore.com. Now, I have no affiliation with them. I get nothing from promoting their site, but I can tell you from my own personal experience that they are a fantastic site. They've got a really great search tool that allows you to put in your specific make, model, all that stuff, and it gives you the exact parts for your machine. They even require a model number when you're placing your order so that they too can verify that the parts you're ordering are correct for your machine. And I even had one time where they contacted me just to make sure of a couple details. Really great service. Again, I don't get anything back. I have no affiliation with them, but that's where I order all my parts from, and that's where this part came from. However, if you have a different model, you can just do a search, find the part number for your specific make, model. Almost all of these machines now seem to have an exploded diagram with part numbers online. I believe there's another website called Jack's Small Engine. Again, I'm not affiliated, and they have tons of diagrams and has been a really helpful resource for me in the past for finding different parts. Again, for this particular machine, part number we're using is AM133627. That is the John Deere part number for my specific model. We're just going to pop this open really quick, take a look at what's inside, and then get this new one installed. Of course, here we have the new pump. We've also got some gaskets and hardware and some fittings. Now, a couple things I'm seeing differently are that the new pump does not have the fittings on here. We will need to install those. Not a big deal though. Other than that, if we take a look, everything looks to be the same as far as dimensions and all that sort of stuff. I can tell by looking at the gasket surface here that there has been some changes made, some updates. It looks like in our kit we've got several different gasket options. We've got kind of a paper type gasket, which is what the original one had, but it looks like the newer ones have more of an O-ring style where you can put an O-ring in there, and there is in fact a shaped O-ring there, which I believe that's what we're going to use. I don't know why we have a metal, looks like a metal plate here with a paper gasket, and the new pump has this O-ring on here. We're going to use the O-ring, and I'm not going to use the paper gasket. That is one thing that I'm not sure why they include. I don't know why they give you that. Maybe it's a spacer of some sort, but looking at this, everything looks identical, so I'm quite certain I don't need to add any sort of spacer. So let's jump right in. We'll cut this pack of gaskets open and get this repair underway. It even comes with new bolts, which is pretty cool. I think we'll install that with the new bolts. Got our little O-ring here. Set that aside. The first thing we're going to need is, oddly enough, this giant snap ring, which is in fact a snap ring, but it's also the tool that lets us install these fittings. So if we get our little fittings out of this little bag here, we can look at the original pump and pretty much determine exactly how we need to install these. So we know that this one is going to go in the same orientation, so that's going to go here. And this one will go right here. The interesting thing is that this snap ring is actually the tool. There's two little tabs on either side of this fitting. These need to be compressed, and then the fitting snaps into place. Kind of an interesting thing. It's not something that I have seen all that often. So we're just going to take this snap ring and we're going to squeeze that down over there. We've got one side kind of locked in. Pull this other side. There we go. It's a little awkward. You could use some snap ring pliers as well, but trying to do that without, just in case you don't have any at home, you can just work that down on there, get one side stuck, and then bring the other side down. So now both of those tabs are pressed in. We're going to take our fitting. I've got just a little bit of motor oil here. It's going to lubricate this O-ring. You don't want to pinch anything. We want it to go together nice and easy. Now we're going to line this up in the same orientation. And this is toothed, so you should be able to just clock this where it needs to go. Pop that down into place, make sure it's seated. You do have to give it a little bit of a press to get it to snap in, but you can clearly feel it snap in. Just make sure the teeth are lined up before you push it in. And that looks the same to me. They're both going the same direction. We'll do the same thing on the other side. This one doesn't really matter because it just needs to go straight out. So I'm going to get this one started, and then we'll just carefully pull this down. It's a little bit tricky. Again, if you have a snap ring plier, that would work awesome here. And there we go. Snap ring squeezing those tabs in. Again, a little oil on our O-ring. Get your teeth lined up, snap that in place. There's our new fittings, both oriented the exact same way. Now, we're going to install this O-ring the same way, a little bit of oil. And that guy is just going to pop in here. Just like so. And now the new pump is ready to go back on. And it turns out I learned something super useful from reading the instructions. A minute ago I mentioned I didn't really know exactly why there was a paper gasket and a spacer. Well, the instructions clearly tell you. In order to figure this out, you have to look at the casting on your motor where the fuel pump mounts to. If that casting is machined flat, then you use the paper gasket, the spacer, and the O-ring. But if it is a rough casting, not machined, then you use just the O-ring. I guess I would have thought it would have been the other way around, but clearly right here it says if the edge is rough, then install the fuel pump using the O-ring only in the groove. Good thing that's what I was going to do anyway. Let's take a look at the casting on ours. So looking at the boss here on the side of the engine, this is where the fuel pump came off of. If we take a close look, I can tell that this is not a machined surface. There's no machining marks, and if I look really close, you can feel and see the rough casting. So, according to the instructions, we would only use the O-ring in this application. If this was machined smooth, flat, and shiny, you could pretty well tell that it's machined. Then we would use the paper gasket, the spacer, then the O-ring. Probably that spacer's there to take up for the depth here that you lost by this being machined. In our case, we don't need to do that because this is not machined. Now I'll use my scraper, and we just need to spend a couple of minutes getting the rest of this gasket material off of here. We want this surface to be perfectly clean, especially since we are not using a paper gasket to put this back on. We're going to rely on just the O-ring to seal everything up. I'm going to switch to a regular razor blade scraper because this is being a little bit stubborn. Once I get it scraped clean, I'm just going to use a little bit of lacquer thinner. Make sure there's no residual grime on there. And we've got everything cleaned up well. One last thing I want to do here is get another piece of fuel line prepared, since I had to cut this one. Got a new piece here. You may or may not need to replace that little fuel line on yours. Now we're ready to take our new pump that we've already lubricated the O-ring. We're ready to put this back in place. Now we got to remember there's a lobe inside there. And we got to make sure that our new pump is sitting on that lobe. You may have to kind of work this fuel line on and the fuel pump into place at the same time in order to get everything to sit. Now I can feel when I go to push this into place that that pump arm is in fact in contact with that lobe, and I kind of have to press that in there. Work our new bolt into place. And we'll snug up the new bolts. Don't crank it down too tight. I'm sure there's a torque spec for that. That I think is right there. Tighten up your hose clamps. Reinstall our lower hose that we still have capped off. Now that we have this reconnected, we can take our little clamp off of there. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that since we have replaced the pump, there's no fuel yet in this pump. It's going to likely take a few extra cranks to get the pump primed, but after that, we should be good to go. Should fire right up. After a couple extra cranks, we got to get a little gas up in there, but should be fine. I'm not worried. It's going to work fine. Wow, not even one extra crank. Wow, I'm impressed. That was awesome. It fired right up. The old pump would have cranked for 30 seconds to a minute. Wow, very cool. We're gonna check down here, just make sure while it's running that nothing's leaking. We don't have any oil leaking or anything like that. There shouldn't be, but it's always good to check. That is cool. That thing fired right up. I actually expected it to crank for a minute or so. Not even. So cool. So there you have it. Really quick and simple fuel pump replacement on your single cylinder Kohler Command engine, whether it's on a John Deere LT160 like I've got or whatever your particular model is. As long as it has this Kohler Command style fuel pump, this is the process. We were able to quickly get this back together, back up and running using just a handful of tools. Really an easy procedure. This thing's back in action, which is good because I got to get back to work and get some mowing done. Hope this video helped you out. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.